G'day, ZiggyD here with another Path of Exile gearing guide. In the last video we took a look at boots, and overall I have to say boots are pretty simple stuff. You just get your move speed, get some life, get some resists, and you're pretty good. In this particular video we're going to be taking a look at gloves, and gloves start to get a little bit more complicated because you have some offensive stats on the available to gloves that you can play around with as well, and that makes a few interesting decisions when it comes to, do I gear defensively or do I gear offensively? And then there's just a larger mod pool in general, so there's a lot more to be aware of compared to boots. So let's jump straight into what's available on gloves. In the prefix side of things, you have item rarity, base max life, base max mana, your local ES, evasion and armor amount, and then percent, and then also the percent combined with stun. So that's pretty much the same as all armor pieces. All armor pieces are going to have those prefixes. However, gloves have something else, a few other stats, that make them unique essentially. So in addition to that, you have things like added min-max cold, fire, lightning, and physical damage. You also have life leech from physical damage, and then you also have mana leech from physical damage available as prefixes on gloves. So as you can see, this pair of gloves here, I have adds 3 to 4 physical, adds 1 to 27 lightning damage. So there's 2 of my 3 available prefixes right there, just in those 2 damage mods. Now the problem with this is a lot of the really good defensive stats are also prefixes. So that means if you want a really good pair of offensive gloves with like 3 damage stats, you have to give up things like life, you have to give up things like evasion, energy shield, armor amounts, and percent. So you can't really get a really solid defensive pair of gloves like this, if you have offensive stats like this. So as you can see, I've already used up 2 of those, and I think, yeah, so that's 2 out of 3 of my prefixes are on this glove already, and that means if I happen to, exalt this, although I would never do that, I could only ever potentially add life or increased armor. So in terms of suffixes, you have your dex in strength, same as all other armor pieces. Your single resist, so lightning, fire, chaos, and ice resists. Then you have quantity and rarity, like normal, life regen, and base stun recovery. Now the things that separate gloves from other armor pieces are you also have things like accuracy rating, attack speed percent, life gain on hit, life gain on kill, and mana gain on kill. So you have some more offensive stats in there, but less towards the damage side of things and more towards healing yourself up and attacking a little bit faster, which is obviously a really good damage stat. So remembering that we can only have 1 prefix and suffix on a magic item, what makes the ideal magic item? Because sometimes when you're leveling, you get kind of desperate and you find a wight that has some good links, but you don't have any arcs available to you. You fail the chance or roll or something like that, and you're pretty much left with no other option but to roll a good magic item. So you've got your 1 prefix and your 1 suffix to play with. So what's a good pair of gloves for that? Well, firstly, life as your prefix. You pretty much always want life on your gear if possible. However, if you can't get high life and you're willing to settle for something else, then added damage or the increased defensive stats, so armor, evasion, energy shield, is also a good prefix to settle on. But overall, I think life is the best one to go for as your prefix on gloves and pretty much all armor pieces in general. And then for your suffix, attack speed or resists are really good. Obviously resists are always really good on armor, but you can't get attack speed in very many places. You can get it on your jewelry, you can get it on your weapons, and you can get it on your gloves. So getting a bit of extra attack speed, if that suits your build and isn't going to destroy your mana requirements or anything like that, then that's also a good one to opt for. Otherwise, try and get a resist that you need. Life resist always a solid option, but damage, attack speed can also be fairly nice on a magic pair of gloves if you don't need the defensive stats too much. So now, in terms of rares, you have pretty much the same idea there. You want to get your life, you want to get your evasion, energy shield, armor, percent or a flat increase to it. Life leech is also a pretty good one to get as a prefix, and then added damage. Now obviously because there's like 4 different types of added damage, you can use all of your mods on that, as I was saying earlier with this pair of gloves that I'm looking at here. So a nice sort of blend of offensive and defensive stats would be something like life, your evasion, energy shield, armor, percent, and then added damage, or instead of added damage, maybe some life leech if you're going for a physical build. So you've got quite a few choices there when it comes to prefixes on your gloves. The suffixes are a little bit more simple. You've got your attack speed, and pretty much resist. If you can get 3 resists on your gloves as all of your suffixes, you can be pretty happy with that pair of gloves. That's usually a very good pair of gloves. But you know, if you can sub out one of those resists for attack speed, then you can also be very happy, because attack speed is very nice to have. So let's do something a little bit different in this video, and I've got 4 pairs of gloves here that I'll evaluate. The gloves I was wearing on this character, which is my duelist, which got its free respec recently, he was wearing these gloves, and I don't really even know why I was wearing these goods. Objectively speaking, the only decent mod on this is adds fire damage, and that's, you know, it's really not that exceptional to have by itself. So the reason I think I was wearing these gloves, I can't actually recall, was I think I was pretty desperate for dexterity, so the 28 dexterity roll was just a necessity thing, but overall these gloves are pretty rubbish, so we can afford to get rid of those. Here we have some fairly low level gloves, but you know, 1 to 4 lightning damage is a fairly high roll for low level gloves. 1 mana gained on kill is nothing at all. 35 maximum life is a fairly good life roll, and 8% fire resist is very low, but still a nice thing to have. It's always nice to have your resist on there. So as a low level pair of gloves, you know, if you don't have many choices available, this is definitely something that you would consider wearing. Probably not good enough to trade to other people unless you know someone who's really desperately looking for some gloves. These ones here has your percent increased armor. 50% isn't, you know, 46 to 50% isn't particularly high, but it's still a fairly nice mod. You know, this is level 48 and it has 200 armor, and this one's level 53 and it has less armor. So having that, you know, that increased armor roll is always very nice defensively speaking. However, this does have an excellent life roll on it. Plus 87 to maximum life, around 48 is very high roll. So that with the armor itself pretty much makes these a good pair of gloves, defensively speaking. Accuracy rating is okay. Your life regen's kind of nothing. 5 is a nice roll at least. And then 9% to cold resistance is a very low roll, but again, still a nice little addition. So you've got a little bit of resist, armor, and life. Makes that a fairly solid piece of pair of gloves, something that I would wear if I was around that level, and again, didn't have too many options available to me. This last pair here I think is pretty good. It's got a low life roll, but still some life is always nice. It's got 2 damage mods. The physical damage mod is quite low, but physical damage scales well if you're going for a physical build with life leech and things like that. The lightning damage is fairly good, 1 in 27 is okay, and 25 to fire resist is fairly nice. And this is something I haven't talked about on the other pieces of armor that I've covered. Increased quantity. You have the choice of increased quantity and rarity on your gear, and you know, if you're going to get magic find gear specifically, you want your double rarity roll and then your quantity in a suffix. So but if you're not, you know, going for a pure magic find build, increased quantity on your gear, you know, just whenever, like as an extra stat, is not a bad thing to have. Increased quantity gives you more currency, gives you more item drops in general, more uniques, more rares, more everything. So it's always nice to have. Overall, this is a fairly solid pair of gloves. I kind of wish the life roll was higher, and I think if the life and maybe the physical roll were a bit higher, these would be, you know, something worth trading, you know, offer an Alk or a Chaos or something for. But I hate to mention specific amounts actually, because, you know, if you're watching this video in a month's time, amounts could change and these gloves could be worth nothing because, you know, gloves have flooded the market. But generally speaking, this is a fairly solid pair of gloves. So hopefully you guys can take this information to be able to identify gloves for yourself, because gloves are something I've struggled with in the past and they are fairly complicated, and that's because they're very similar to weapons. Weapons are the hardest items in the game to evaluate, and I'll eventually be covering those, but gloves sort of, you know, they take the armor side of things and add a bit of the complexity of weapons into it, so that can be a little bit tricky, but hopefully this has helped you guys break it down a little bit more. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.